Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, August 29th, 2022. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy, our new host of our new podcast that's going to run, I think, every Thursday, right? Bucknuts Happy Hour. You're going to do a weekly podcast. It debuted last week, so congratulations on your new podcast. I think that's a cool addition to our podcast team. So good to have Patrick on today's show. A lot to get into, obviously. Game week has arrived. We are 5 days away from the much anticipated matchup, Ohio State against Notre Dame at Ohio Stadium. Patrick, your general thoughts on the matchup, your thoughts on the spread, which is up to 17 now. The floor is yours, my friend.
Well, first of all, I'm just excited that we're back. It's been a long off season, as I'm sure everybody listening and watching this can attest to. It's football time, and I went to a high school game this past week. Felt good to see football back out there, competitive. We weren't just watching practice, so that was good stuff. Just excited for that to really get going. In terms of this game, obviously, we've been building towards this, since that Rose Bowl game last year, and kind of talking about what we expected. I think you and I have both made it pretty clear that we think Ohio State is rightfully the favorites in this game. That's 17 and a half. I think it moved up to 17 and a half points yesterday.
It keeps ticking up every time I look. I didn't even check this. I should have checked this morning. Yeah, it keeps ticking up every day.
Look, we're talking 3 scores here, and I trust the people in Vegas, certainly, and they are often correct on these things, but it reminds me a little bit of the Oregon game last year, and not that I think it'll play out that way, but just I remember just being shocked that Ohio State was such a big favorite against Oregon, especially coming off of a game against Minnesota where they were good but not great. This one obviously is a little different. You don't have the first game to kind of judge anything. So I'm surprised it's gone up as much as it has. Obviously, betting lines are made to get people to bet both ways. So I'm assuming that plays a little bit into it. But, I think the Buckeyes are the better team. They're playing at home. This is a motivated group that I think will be motivated throughout the season. And I think they'll take care of business against Notre Dame. Whether it can match that 17 and a half point spread, I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, I do the Sunday show on the Fan that, we talk a lot of just regular sports, but we also talk a lot about sports gambling and we talk fantasy football. But of course, I talk a lot about the Buckeyes. But if I was going to give gambling advice here, I think the spread, my projections have Ohio State covering, but I think now no bet is safe. That's why it's called gambling, but I like the over. It's 58 and a half, unless that's changed as well this morning. I just feel like these teams are going to combine for 60 points or more. I mean, really 59 points or more is what you need to win that bet. I don't see this game going under. Anything's possible, but I like the over of 58 and a half. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there should be some scoring in this one. Look, we've heard great things about Ohio State's defense. We've seen a lot of good things, but and I've said this all off season, until I see it, and against a good opponent like Notre Dame, not that Notre Dame has a ton of coming back on the offensive side, that they lost some key guys from last year, but I need to see it first before I can be like, oh yeah, this is a shutdown defense, and start taking the under on some of those games. I'm also curious just how much this spread and the way people are talking about this game is going to be used by the Notre Dame side as motivation. These guys are coming in with high ambitions this year. Like I said, top 5 team in the somewhat meaningless, but still out there preseason rankings. If you're Notre Dame, you're walking into Ohio Stadium hearing how you're not even going to be in this game. I assume Marcus Freeman and his staff, don't forget James Laurinaitis, a former Buckeye, also on that staff. I'm hanging these things up in the locker room if I'm Notre Dame. So I wonder just how much that plays into things too. Again, I still think Ohio State's a more talented team and we'll take care of business, but I'd certainly use this if I were Marcus Freeman and his staff.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of James Laurinaitis being on that staff. Not anything against James. I just mean, I know he's not even he's like an analyst, right? Like a support staff guy. Yeah. He's not their linebackers coach, but but he's not like a grad assistant either, right? But my point is, I think highly of James and kind of wish he wasn't there, I mean, Marcus Freeman, whatever. I mean, as a head coach, we'll see if he's over his head or not. That doesn't really concern me. But yeah, I'd prefer if James Laurinaitis wasn't there. I did find it interesting. Ryan Day was asked, as you were at the press conference as always. He was asked point blank, did you ever have conversations with James about bringing him on your staff. And I thought he was going to deflect the question, maybe say, no, we never really. He said, yeah, we had discussions. It just, for whatever reason, didn't work out. What did you make of that?
Well, I think anyone you talk to that's worked closely with James has always said, and if you watched Big Ten Network and some of the stuff he's done over the last few years or listened to him when he was on The Fan, you could tell that this guy, if he ever wanted to get involved in coaching, would certainly be able to make an impact. He knows the game so well. I loved watching, even if it wasn't an Ohio State game, watching the way he breaks down defenses. I always made sure to tune in to when he was doing the show with Bo on The Fan on Mondays when they talked about the Buckeye games, because I think he gives great analysis, and I think that he knows the game so well. So, yeah, I think that was a big get for Marcus Freeman. Obviously, those two old buddies from their playing days here. But, it's interesting that Ryan Day had those conversations, because I think, talent recognizes talent in the coaching world. And it's unfortunate that it didn't work out. We don't know the details behind it, but it would have been great to have James in that building, helping the Buckeyes heading into this season. Obviously, getting the chance to work with a guy like a Jim Knowles and some of the other guys on the staff would have been huge for his career. But, it's going to be interesting. Also, keep in mind now that the defensive staff has changed, but James, being a former player and a media member, spent some time out at practice over the last few years, so he knows a thing or two about what the Buckeyes want to do. Again, a little bit different coaches now, some different
different. Let's be clear, a lot different on defense.
Well, even on the offensive side of the ball.
I'm hoping, because I've heard this from other fan bases, I'm hoping teams, I don't think coaches are going to be this dense. If anybody out there is thinking Ohio State defense in 2020 and 2021 is going to look anything like this year's defense, you haven't been paying attention. Like, they had the worst defensive scheme I've ever seen, maybe other than Bill Young when he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State under John Cooper in the 90s. As soon as they fired Bill Young, brought in Fred Puggich, that's first year silver bullets were created in 1996. But I digress. The scheme was unbelievably awful last year. I keep hearing people say, we'll see about Ohio State's defense if they can improve a little bit. They're going to improve a lot. I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, sorry.
Well, just to add to that, I agree completely scheme-wise, but just the experience. Think about when they started that game last year against Minnesota, the number of first-time guys stepping on the field as starters, and then how many guys they were rotating in and out defensively, trying to find the right players. This year, there's almost no positions that we couldn't tell you, this guy's going to start. We've seen this guy play. It's a group that knows how to play. As Ryan Day said, they've been out there. They've made the mistakes. They've learned from the mistakes. They've been through it before. It's not a first time doing it. And I think that's probably not as important as scheme, because I think having great scheme and being able to adjust in game is going to be huge for this. But just having the talent out there be experienced talent and not doing it for the first time, especially given this opponent.
No doubt about it. All right, let's get to some questions. This comes from Richard on YouTube. Extra linebacker to load the line against the run. See if their quarterback can throw. Basically, is Ohio State going to sell out to stop the run to make this young quarterback, Tyler Buckner, throw the football? Patrick, you can give your answer first, and I'll follow up.
I doubt, unless Notre Dame comes out and plays the power eye traditional sets, things like that, I doubt that they load up with three true linebackers on the field. Let's remember, Notre Dame's leading running back last year, Kyron Williams, over 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. He's in the NFL now. So, it's not like they're returning a star running back on this team. What I think that Notre Dame is going to do will dictate what Ohio State's defense looks like. And I imagine they come out, they're out of shotgun, they have receivers. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't try and run the ball consistently. You can certainly run the ball out of those formations. But I think Ohio State, this isn't the game where I think you see a third linebacker on the field a lot. You could see some Court Williams in there playing one of the safety spots to kind of be a bigger bodied safety.
As soon as you said that, one of our members of our live audience, as soon as you said Court, you guys, the comment came in at the exact time you were saying. You get great minds think alike. Deech on YouTube and Patrick both are saying, I think Court Williams plays a lot in this game. Go ahead, Pat.
Well, and I just think, you've got to be able to adjust. And that's one thing with Jim Knowles. And I think if he sees, okay, Notre Dame's doing this, even though we thought this is what we were going to see from their offense, he'll make the necessary adjustments for the Buckeyes. And it doesn't need to take till halftime, I don't think, with a guy like Jim Knowles. I think he can make these adjustments on the fly, and the rest of that staff. I really like this whole group. So I think that'll be key. But no, I think Wisconsin is when you start to see maybe that third linebacker on the field regularly. I think that's probably the first game. Maybe they do some of it, depending on what Toledo or Arkansas State do, just to practice those packages. But that's the one where I'm pointing to is, okay, now we'll learn a little bit about what it looks like when they bring three linebackers out there.
Yeah, I agree about the Court Williams comment from both of you guys. Yeah, I think he'll mix it up. I don't think he's just going to sell it to stop the run, but there's, I think they are going to err on the side of, stopping the run and trying to make this young quarterback, prove that he can beat Ohio State, in the air. And Knowles, another thing, he's good at disguising coverages and confusing quarterbacks and confusing the offensive coordinator, keeping them guessing. He's also good at in-game adjustments from everything that I've learned about him. He's ready. He says we have answers for everything. At least that's the plan. You never know, but we have answers for everything. Nothing's going to be perfect. As he said, you really need 13 defenders out there to cover everything. So there's going to be times that there's holes. There's really a hole somewhere in every coverage, or even if if it's a running play, there's a weakness in every, defense you're going to throw out there on every play. It just, can the offense find it? So I think fans are going to love Knowles. I can't wait to see it. So I think he's going to mix it up. Okay, we have Ed on YouTube saying Knowles isn't going to substitute. Here's the thing, though. Patrick, you can touch on this a little bit too, but they're going to still rotate a lot on the D line. I asked him. I was curious because you're right. Ed's right. In the back seven, they're not going to – saying he's not going to substitute isn't really accurate because he's going to sub in Court Williams, who's not a starter. He said that, there's certain guys that are not starters that are going to play. They're going to need a number 3 corner to play, whether that's Jordan Hancock or J.K. Johnson. One of those guys is going to play. They're going to need backups to play. Lathan Ransom's going to play. So that's another backup. So they're going to rotate a little bit in the back seven, but not much. But they're going to rotate a lot up front.
As you mentioned, and you wrote about this, Jim Knowles hasn't traditionally been a big rotation guy in the secondary, but he also hasn't had the talent that he has, the depth of talent, the experience of some of these guys that he has. I mean, just think about the safety position, for instance. And, we think it'll be Josh Proctor, Ronnie Hickman, Tanner McAllister. And you just named 2 other guys that could step in there. They probably have at least one guy at each position that could step in and do some things. So while I don't think Jim Knowles is the type that's just going to rotate for rotation's sake, if he sees a guy that's game ready and deserves to be on the field, whether it's situationally or if he just wants to get that guy experience, get him out there, see what he can do, I think you will see more of it than maybe he did at Oklahoma State. But, in a game like Notre Dame, you have to have the best guys out there to win the game. You can rotate more in these upcoming games. But I do think the guys you mentioned are guys that could certainly step in even against Notre Dame and play a role.
Yeah, we had some people ask if Knowles is going to coach from the field or the box. I asked Day about that a few weeks ago. For those that haven't heard, I just put a note up there. But Knowles will coach from the field. Hey, I believe in him. Some coaches just want to be down there and they want to look their players in the eye. That's what they say. I'm a big believer in coordinators should coach from the box. You just see the game so much better. It's a sterile environment. Now, I know you have eyes in the skies that they're communicating with. I love my coordinators being in the box. Jeff Hafley swore by it. Tom Herman, whatever you want to say about Tom Herman out there, Buckeye fans, he was outstanding as an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Outstanding. Undefeated in 2012 with a very young Braxton Miller who balled out that year. Carlos Hyde. 2013, the offense wasn't the problem in that Michigan State game. And then 2014, they win the national championship. So those are his 3 years. So Tom Herman swore by being in the box. So head coach Ryan Day calls the plays on offense. He's on the field. And then the defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, is also going to be on the field. So got to trust those guys. They know a lot more about football than I do. I just have always been a strong believer the coordinator should be in the box. But I'll get over it, I think. Probably. If they play well, I'll get over it very easily. All right. Spider Sillery from YouTube. How much do you think Notre Dame will score on Jim Knowles' defense? What do you think, Pat?
It's a good question. As I said at the beginning, I'm still very much in the wait and see mode. I do think it'll be improved. One of the things I've said a lot recently is it would not surprise me if this defense just gets better week after week. And obviously the opponents will change the way we view the defense playing at Notre Dame versus playing in Arkansas State or Toledo. But I could see, maybe some struggles early just as you really get out there on the field. And maybe Notre Dame benefits off that, gets a play or two where they can break one and you get 17, 21 points. But I really think that this defense is just going to get better the more they're out there doing it. And by the end of the year, you could be talking about, okay, this defense has really improved over what you saw at the beginning of the season. I still think they'll be able to hold Notre Dame in check. You've got a tight end. I think it's Michael Myers, who you're going to have to contend with.
Michael Mayer. Yeah, Michael Mayer is the best tight end in the country. Yep, go ahead. Yep.
So that's a guy that has me a bit concerned, but obviously a new quarterback, as I mentioned before, new running backs. They're breaking in guys at some other positions. So, this is an offense for Notre Dame that we don't know a ton about, to be entirely fair. And obviously new coaching staff can do some things differently. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how they contend. I don't think Notre Dame's going to score in bunches, but to be fair, I didn't think that against Oregon last year, and they did enough to win. So we'll see what happens. But I do trust this defense much more than I did a year ago.
Yes. Again, proof will be in the pudding. I've been saying it all offseason. I think Knowles was a grand slam hire, but maybe he'll go out there and hit a single and I'll be wrong. Or, golden sombrero. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I don't think he's going to strike out 4 times. I think he's going to be what Buckeye fans wanted and what Ryan Day wanted in a defensive coordinator. All right. Not so much a question, but a comment. I want to get in on this. This is from Facebook, from Randy. The offensive line is what I'm worried about for the Buckeyes, he says. Patrick, is that a valid concern? And I don't think he's just talking about depth. I think some people need to see. I'm very high on Paris Johnson at left tackle because I know he wants to be great, and that's so important. He's such high character. His work ethic is through the roof. So I believe in him. And he obviously has the physical traits, but he's never started a game at left tackle before or tackle, period. He's at guard. So is that a reasonable concern? Are you concerned about the O-line?
I think it is a reasonable concern. If there's something on the offensive side of the ball that I'm concerned with, that would be it. Maybe tight end, but I think they've got a good group there. I mean, you just have so much coming back at the other positions. And while you do have guys coming back on the offensive line, I mean, 3 guys who started last year, as you mentioned, Paris Johnson, a different position. Matthew Jones played quite a bit, and we like what we've seen from Donovan Jackson. As you mentioned, they've got to get out on the field and do it. And offensive line is a position where, going against guys in practice is one thing. And we've heard great things about Ohio State's defensive line and what they've done. But that can be flipped on its head. And, okay, is this offensive line not playing up to standard? I think the offensive line is better set up for success with the way they're doing it. That's not 4 tackles out there. I think that'll certainly help the run game. And I really like Justin Fry. Ryan Day made the point recently that he's not just an offensive line coach. He was an offensive coordinator at UCLA, and he mentioned that he sees the whole field. He doesn't just see the offensive line. And I think that's really interesting to have as an offensive line coach and a guy who I think is in pretty much lockstep with Ryan Day. But again, it's a fairly new group of guys playing different positions. And, I think that would be my one concern of the offense if I have one. I still wouldn't rank it super high at this point.
All right. 3 more questions I want to get to before we end the show. This comes from YouTube. Sexton Brothers. How healthy is this Ohio State team compared to a typical team coming out of preseason? I'd say pretty damn good. I feel really good about the health of this team. Obviously, you got some guys that are banged up, but it doesn't sound like they've had any super serious injuries. Obviously they lost Mitchell Melton in the spring. Am I forgetting about somebody in the fall? Oh yeah, Evan Pryor. I knew I was forgetting about somebody. Evan Pryor. So that sucks for Evan Pryor. Other than Evan Pryor, I don't think we've had any serious injuries in camp, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think every time you get to this point of year, if there's anyone of note banged up, it's a bit of a panic, especially for fans who don't get to see it every day. I hope Jordan Hancock's ready to go for game 1 because I do think they can use him. I like everything we saw and heard about him prior to camp and him picking up an injury. But I saw him walk off the practice field when we were getting ready for interviews, and he was bouncing around a little bit late last week. So looks like he's moving in the right direction. But yeah, I think, there have been some guys that have missed some time, but I think that's pretty normal. And, maybe you just don't hear about it as much, some camps than others. But yeah, I mean, you don't even practice football without there being some guys taking some injuries. Fortunately, as you mentioned, Dave, there haven't been many long-term guys. And, it hasn't been a guy who we knew that they were full on counting on. As much as Evan Pryor may have played, Mitchell Melton may have played, they weren't going to be the starter at either position. So yeah, I think they're in a good spot right now.
Yes, I mean last year C.J. Stroud's shoulder was so banged up that they were having days where he didn't even throw a pass,
Yep.
and he was favoring that shoulder for a lot. I mean, we saw in the Minnesota game he was over there like, obviously they didn't tip their hand and tell us. They're like, oh, we're just giving him a rest. You know, it's like a pitcher in baseball. We just don't want him to throw too much. Turns out his shoulder was banged up and was banged up for most of the year, which is why I think he didn't run much last year when he clearly could have picked up like easy first downs and just get out of bounds. I don't need him taking hits, but he has a clear path on 3rd and 8 to get a first down. Go get it, get out of bounds, get down. All right. So, yeah, the team's healthy. Good question there. Somebody wants to know real quick, how is this is Hangry Veteran, Hangry Veteran from YouTube. How good is Notre Dame's offensive line? I'll just be succinct here. They're good on both lines. Notre Dame, I think they returned 4 starters up front, Patrick. Correct me if I'm wrong, on their O-line. And their D-line's good, too. And if you're tough in the trenches, you're going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly experienced group. All but I think maybe their 2 tackles, I think, are everyone else is the interior of the offensive line. I believe is projected to be, juniors or seniors. Guys on the outside, I think, have played quite a bit, if I'm remembering it correctly. So, yeah, I mean, I expect this Notre Dame offensive line to be good. They were good last year. I think it's certainly going to challenge this defensive line that, as I mentioned before, we've heard quite a bit of positive stuff about what this group has done in practice. And, you got to prove it now in these games. And you're doing it against a different offensive line. There'll be some different things that they show and whatnot.
Okay, let's get to just a couple more here. We'll close the show. This is from Facebook. This comes from Chris. Do you think Knowles will use bracket coverage on Mayer? And he says Sonny Styles was built for this role down the line. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I almost missed the last part. I was going to say Sonny Styles is going to be a stud, but he should be a senior in high school right now. He's a third. But still, even though he's a true freshman, should be in high school. You got a lot of depth at safety when Sonny Styles is a third teamer. Kai Stokes looked like a star in the spring. I think he's going to be a future star. He's a third team guy. So they've got so much depth at safety, and I am here for it. I think they're going to mix things up. He seemed to be very confident when we asked him about Michael Mayer, that his safeties can get the job done there. Proctor can get it done. Lathan Ransom can get it done. He said they're going to give up some inches, but they're tough, and they're going to be right in his grill. So I don't know if he's going to use bracket coverage, but they are going to have different things that they're going to mix it up. Knowles is going to mix it up, but they are very, very, very aware. He said we have to know where he is on every play. Like, they are very aware they're going up against the best tight end in the country.
Agreed. I think you'll see a number of different looks to see what works best, and to keep him, thinking about what the coverage is, what's coming his way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, last one here. All right, let's get this one in. I like this. Okay, this is switching gears here. We've been talking so much about just the Notre Dame game, rightfully so. Game week. This is awesome. 5 days away. Top 5 matchup. Ohio State and Notre Dame have not had a home and home since 1995 and 1996. Haven't played at the Horseshoe since 1995. Love this. And at the top, it'd be cool if Ohio State was 5th and Notre Dame was 12th, in the rankings. 2 versus 5, 2 of the most historic programs ever, although Notre Dame really hasn't won much since 1989, but I digress. I don't think they've won a big bowl game since then. But still, I mean, this is awesome. All right, Nick. Final question on the show. This is really like a request. This is coming from YouTube. Nick wants to know, can you talk about the new team-based deal where every player gets $100? $100. They're giving them $100, $100,000 a year. So every player, for those that missed it, every player on the team now through the foundation is going to get $100,000, period. Everybody, walk-on, scholarship, $100,000. And then in addition to that, they can get however much they make with their other NIL deals. C.J. Stroud's making 7 figures. Travion Henderson's making 7 figures. Other guys are doing well. Jackson Smith and Jigba's doing super well, as you can imagine. I've heard Paris Johnson's doing really well. On and on and on. Patrick, your thoughts about I like the 100,000 K per player thing. It's going to help with recruiting.
Absolutely. That's where I was going to go. I think we've heard so much about the collectives at other programs and, whether or not that has affected guys' decisions. I think every kid's a different situation, right? But, knowing that that's set up here, a number of Buckeyes just joined a group that's doing, fans can get involved. where you can pay to be a part of. I think they're doing like a message board and certain meet and greet type situations, which I think is an awesome idea. Fans kind of getting to know the players a little bit more and the players benefiting from that. So yeah, the fact that you have things that are now set and kind of ready to go, it's not just, okay, we know CJ Stroud and those guys. Now everybody's getting a little piece of the pie, and not a small chunk either. That's a good amount of money for a college kid. So yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it'll only help them in the recruiting. And real quick, as we're talking recruiting, I know we don't do it a ton. Huge weekend. I think that could be the biggest thing that comes out. Obviously, you want to win the game. You want to look good doing it, for a number of reasons. But with the number of not only the kids that are going to be at that game, but everyone's going to be watching this game. Buckeye defense goes out and looks good. I think you start to see things shift as kids probably want to see it more than one game, but it definitely changes some minds if they go out there and look like the group that you expect the Silver Bullets to be.
Great point on recruiting, and if they look really good on defense, yeah, that's going to help with recruiting too. And it's a huge recruiting weekend, night game. It's another thing I love about it. Usually, being reporters, we kind of like the noon games. If fans don't like them, we kind of like the noon games because then we're not working till 2 a.m. But I'll be doing a live podcast right after the game ends, like 5 minutes after the game ends. I would do it right at the final gun if I could, but I have to find a safe spot there in the press box. Maybe I'll use one of the private boxes after they clear out. But I'll be doing a live podcast right after every Ohio State game this year, every game, home and road. So join me for those. Bucknuts post-game live. And then, it's actually What We Learned Live. We're calling it What We Learned Live. It'll be our post-game show after every game. And I'm also going to do a written What We Learned for the site every Monday, which will just be parroting what I said on the live show each Saturday. So great stuff from Patrick Murphy. Really appreciate it, Patrick. Thank you to all of our listeners, all our viewers. Really appreciate the live audience with the questions and comments. Thanks to everybody. We know you have a lot of choices. Thanks so much for making us a part of your morning. Hope everyone has a great day.